Hello, and welcome to Week 6, Unit 1 of Application Development for SAP Business by Design. In this unit, we're going to look at business configuration. Now, business configuration is basically what allows customers to set up and adapt their tenants to their specific needs. There's lots of functionality that's delivered by default in SAP Business by Design, but not all of it has to be used, right? We can select what we want to use, and that's what business configuration really does for us. So we also need business configuration in our solutions for the SAP Cloud Application Studio. And by default, the most basic thing we need is what's called the BOC element, a Business Adaptation Catalog element. Now, you've already probably created one in a previous unit for testing of some of our items like web services, forms, things like that, where we had to deploy our business configuration to the tenant for it to know what our solution contained. Here we're going to look at in detail what a BOC actually is. We just created it before. We didn't really talk about it much. This is going to be what it is and why it is. We'll also be able to look at some of the other info that's there. So there's things like business configuration objects, business configuration set, BC view, and there's also a few other things in here. And we're going to create some of these, a BCO and a BC set. We'll talk about the other ones though. So let's jump into the studio and take a look. So first off, I'm logged into the SAP Cloud Application Studio with my development user, and I'm going to create a BOC element here, or I open my BOC element. I've already created it, but let's talk about what the different things are. So when we look at the Business Adaptation Catalog, let's go ahead and open this here. You can see there's a wide variety of areas that everything is broken down into. So there's marketing, sales, service, sourcing. Even within sales, there's a breakdown of different areas, accounts and activity management, new business, selling products. And these have their own areas. And when we scope a system, when we implement it, have to say which ones of these that we want scoped in, what should be turned on functionally. And even within these, they have their own questions to kind of help define more distinct behaviors for each system and each element of there. And then there's, of course, more fine-tuning, other details where you can even tweak it on a finer point. And so we have to, at a minimum, create a scoping question here, an option to be able to add into an option that already exists. So we are going to basically, at a minimum, have a business option here. We also can create a new topic and option. So in that big list in the Business Adaptation Catalog, we can create our own entries in there and if we have a solution that's completely new or it doesn't fit in somewhere, we can create a new topic and put it in there. Also, we have the option for country-specific and business options. So if I create a solution that is relevant only to, let's say, Brazil, I can make sure that you have to have Brazil scoped in, and then you can use that solution. For now, we're going to keep business option. I need to give it a name. I'm giving my bonus plan here, very basic. I'm not going to see this in the UI with my business option. I'm just going to see actually a description itself. So what's the description of this? Scoping question, so a question asking the person, what do they want to enable this specific item? I need to give it an overview and some relevance too. What is an overview of what this solution is going to be doing and what is it relevant to? And make sure when you maintain these that you make them clear and precise and defined. This is something that somebody is going to need to not only scope into the system, but they may want to reference it down the road. You may somebody that comes into this tenant in a year and looks at this, and they may not know if it's standard or not. So if you clearly point it out, this is my custom content, this is what it does, it's very easy to identify later on for somebody else who may not already be familiar with this specific entry. Once I have all of that, I need to create an anchor or tie my solution into an anchor. So I've selected sales orders here. I could have selected anywhere else. I chose sales orders because it was most relevant since our bonus plans are based off of them. Even if I had a number of objects, opportunities, leads, anything else in here, I could still pick sales orders. I need one at a minimum as my main anchor point. If I have other ones that I want to add in, I can use the required scope to do that, to say that you should also have these different items, opportunities, leads, whatever it might be, scoped into your tenant as well. For us, sales orders is sufficient right now. I don't need any other required scope, although I have that option. So I created that. For now, we don't need to go ahead and continue through that. We already have our BOK element. Let's look at some of the other stuff. So in here, if we start from the bottom, actually, let's look at these bottom two first. There's an implementation project template where you can basically define a new implementation project or a new implementation scenario for a customer to start out with on their tenant. So you may have a solution that requires something like this, and you have the option to create it. Also, there's a tax decision tree. The system itself has places where it needs to decide on what kind of taxes to use and how, and we have the tax decision tree in here to be able to help modify that and enhance it and adapt it to what we need in our solution. So this can be maybe really helpful to you as well. I'm not going to go into much detail about these past what we've discussed. We're going to focus more on the top few, but want to at least point these out. Now, we're going to go ahead and create a business configuration object and a business configuration set. We won't go through the creation of the view here, but we'll talk about it. A business configuration object is basically a key value pair along with a number of attributes. So if you remember back from an earlier unit, I said that we couldn't create our own data types except for code lists, and that's exactly what this is going to lead to for us. If we select SAP here and see there's a code list data type entry, I can even create my own just specific static code list. This code list data type, again, will take a key value pair, no additional attributes though, and I can use that as a data type to assign to elements in my business objects. But I will not be able to change this after I've deployed the solution out in production. And I can come back and change it here in the studio, but in the productive tenant, I can't change it directly there. And like I said, there's no attributes to help filter these values based by. What a business configuration object does, and a BC set that it follows, allows us to do that. It also gives us a key value pair. We can get a data type off of it if we want. And then there's a number of attributes that can be there. Let's go ahead and just create this years, I'm going to call this years BCO, and say add, and brackets for number of years of service. And I'm going to tell it to create a data type. And let's look in this next screen. So here's where I can define it. So I'm going to, first off, it always has a key, right? It must have a key. You can have a length anywhere to up to, I believe 99 it is in here, which is quite a large unique key. And you'll want to give it some type of name. So I'm going to give mine code and say code. And then I'm going to call this one description. And important here, if you plan on using this as a data type in UI, make sure you don't leave this as attribute. Even though I've said I want this to be my description, there is specifically a description field type I should use, and I can only use that once. You'll notice I can't use it again down here. Even if I try and select it, it wouldn't let me save this. The key value and the description is a must if you're using it on the UI. If you use this business configuration object for other things, maybe just general configuration and fine-tuning, then you don't need a description necessarily, but in UI you do. So I'm going to give mine one. I'm going to say it's mandatory as well. And then I can also give a number of attributes. So I may want to filter this by, I don't know, different text, dates, times, another code list value maybe, and we can basically create something that will allow us to filter. We can maintain this list later and filter that list based on these other attributes. So for example, if you have a dependent code list, you have two or more code lists that you want the values to be selective of each other, I would need an attribute here in my code list to say the type should be code, and it should have the data type of the code list value of the previous code list. And then I can say that, okay, if you selected A from the previous list, here's what values are relevant for A, and et cetera, et cetera. And then I would keep carrying that on for all my dependent code lists. And so that's what a BCO can help us do. You may also just have a very simple business configuration object and set, like we will do here. So I'm just going to add this in real quick. So let's go ahead and do this again. Didn't like what I did before. I'm going to change that to description and say next and finish. Now, I'm going to activate this, and then I'm going to create a BC set off of this. So a business configuration set is always based off of a BCO here, a business configuration object, and that's going to be the actual values, the maintaining of the list of values. The business configuration object just defines the structure of what this list can be and what the values can have, and the BC set is actually going to have that list of values. So then I'll go in there and I'll maintain all my different values. And then now the benefit of this too is that we can also create that BC view. So that third one that we saw on the new screen. The BC view is, we obviously can create and maintain the list here in the studio. And even after I deploy it, I want to come back and change it, I can still do that from the SAP Cloud Application Studio. If I want to be able to change it directly in production though, for that specific productive tenant, I can do that with a BC view. A BC view will basically give me a way that I can maintain my BC set from within fine-tuning of the business configuration of that tenant. So I may pre-deliver a set of 4 or 5 values here, let's say, and then in production I want to be able to modify those values. And I have that option here with the BC view. An important thing to note, we talked a little bit about the code list data type. Even though that also is a code list, and a BC set essentially is a code list as well, I cannot convert a code list data type into a BC set. So if I know that I want to have something like a BC set, it always must be created as that. Otherwise, I'll have to go back and recreate create a new BC set and re-maintain all my values from the code list I originally had. So let's go ahead and right-click here and say Create Business Configuration Set. Also, years set, years BC set. I'm telling it the BCO to use, so here it is there. And then I just maintain my values here. So I could say code value 01 is 0 to 1 year, for example. 02 is 1 to 5 years, and 03, and we'll go ahead and add years to these. Years, we'll say 1 to 5 years, and then 0 to 3 is 5+ years. All right, so then I can maintain some type of list here. If I had attributes, I'd maintain those as well. And then I can also say if this is relevant for fine-tuning. So when I created my BOK element, I had this option to say if it should be relevant for fine-tuning or not. Also, I can say if it's mandatory for go-live of a specific tenant. And if I do that, this is when I'm going to need a BC view, because I'll obviously want to add a view, create a view, and add it into fine-tuning, and then people can maintain it. But if I do that, I have a few options here. I can say if people can add new values to this list in production, and then also of these values, if they can delete them. I won't be able to change these values in production. I can add and remove new ones, or delete these if I specify. But that's basically what these will do. So I can even provide it a little more fine-tuning around these and give it so that in production I can go ahead and maintain new values, delete these ones, and be able to configure this code list in production without having to go through creating a new patch solution and developing my changes and then redeploying them. So let's go ahead and say next and finish here, and then you'll see I can actually just use this as a data type in my object. So let me activate this. And since it's a value here, a code list value, it'll also, when I put it in the UI, show it as a drop-down then. So then I can have this drop-down to be able to show this code list and be able to utilize that as part of my object. So for example, if I open my business object here, let's just say element years service, and you'll notice here if I say control space, there should be Here we go, years BCO code. And this is my years BCO, the name of my years BCO with the word code. And this actually gives us the data type that this field now would now use that code list, the BC set that I maintained before. And so that's business configuration. It's basically, like I said, we have to have a BOK element at the minimum. That is a must. You will not be able to actually go through the life cycle and deploy your solution unless you have it. It's part of the check. But you can also create business configuration objects, business configuration sets, also create views for them so you can provide fine-tuning in the UI and in the actual business configuration UI. And then you can utilize this as a data type in any number of elements in your different business objects. We also saw, just to mention, the implementation project template and the tax decision tree. Those are also two more types of business configuration that are in there. Although we didn't see them here, they are available. So you can also get as complex as you want. You could have a lot more business configuration. You could even use the BCO and a BC set, not necessarily as a data type, but maybe as some type of configuration table within your solution and provide that in fine-tuning so people can go in and add and change configurations. And then the BCO itself actually acts as a special business object and has a query. So you can even go and query against that BCO and look for the different values in there, and it'll look for whatever's maintained within the BC set itself. And that's where you could use it as a configuration table to help more fine-tune your solution itself, provide a little bit more flexibility in your solution. So that's business configuration. That's the end of this unit. In the next unit, we will look at an overview of lifecycle. Thank you.